The Eastern Pacific is hot. The Atlantic is not. What's going on, guys? Certified meteorologist Jonathan Kegas back with you. I know that was cheesy, but here we go. The Eastern Pacific has given the Northern Hemisphere its first hurricane of the 2025 hurricane season. We'll talk about why the Eastern Pacific is on fire right now and why the Atlantic is quiet. We'll look at long range models a little bit later on in the episode as well. And there's something interesting going on with the sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic basin. We'll talk about what that is towards the end of the video. Stick around for that. First, though, before we get into all of the information, if you want to stay updated on this hurricane season and join the best weather community on YouTube, on the internet, now well over 100,000 strong, you've come to the right place. Hit that subscribe button. We are a no nonsense channel, and we take out the garbage when it comes to the trash on social media. Here we go. Tropical satellite. Hurricane Barbara is mentioned, the first hurricane of the Northern Hemisphere season. That's going to be everything in the Northern Hemisphere: Eastern Pacific, Atlantic, Western Pacific. The latest first hurricane in the Northern Hemisphere since way back in 1993. Also have another tropical storm out there. Those popped this weekend. Barbara came around as a hurricane today, Monday, June 9th. And then there is also another area in the tropics in the Eastern Pacific side, south of Mexico, that has a 60% shot to develop. If that does develop, that would be the Dtorm in the Eastern Pacific. That'd be the fourth named storm in the Eastern Pacific. Now, their season does start earlier than the Atlantic, but if they do get the fourth named storm to come before July 15th, they will be running about a month and a couple of days ahead of schedule. So they are certainly popping. The Atlantic, by the way, typically doesn't see their first named storm until June 20th. So we're still pretty much on par with where we should be with not having anything through June 9th. There are the tracks. They are expected to weaken. The Cosme is expected to become a hurricane either later Monday night or into early Tuesday morning, the 10th. Regardless, both of those are expected to not last very long and weaken considerably and really not impact land. These are the types of storms we like. Again, we want to keep everything away from Mexico, the Baja Peninsula as well. And it looks like that is going to be the case going forward. Now, we've talked about this at length on this channel going forward, that we expected the activity to blossom in the Eastern Pacific. First and foremost, they get about a 2-week head start on the Atlantic basin. Secondly, we had that MJO Pulse that we were really talking about coming through, and that was going to highlight that side of the basin first. So you see this big green blob. This is what we call the vertical velocity anomaly, the rising motion anomaly. And where you see the dark green, let me bust out the telestrator. You see that dark green area over the Eastern Pacific? That's exactly right where we have those storms. So that was born of that Madden-Julian oscillation pulse to force up thunderstorms. The conditions were ripe, and now we had those turn into tropical storms and now hurricanes as far as Barbara and Cosme are going to be concerned. Also, that fourth area out there as well could be the D storm. So here we go. June. This is now through June 23rd. So we've taken this model out into the future, June 23rd, and you see it's still a little green. The anomalies aren't as pronounced. So while we still have rising motion trying to sneak into the Atlantic side just a little bit, still through that last week of June, it's most pronounced in the Eastern Pacific, maybe trying to sneak into the Western Caribbean, Bay of Campeche. And then as we get into the first week of the last week of this is the last couple of days of June, June 30th now, it is not as far pronounced by any means, not as pronounced, not even close into parts of Central America as well. But we would still be watching that area for maybe a little bit of activity on the Atlantic side. As far as the Atlantic side is concerned, first, before we get into that, I wanted to bring your attention to a newsletter that I write that is delivered to your inbox every Monday if you're interested in that. So that comes out later on this evening, Monday, June 9th, and then every Monday and as needed. Would love it if you guys sign up. It's basically just my thoughts on the tropics delivered in a no nonsense, no hype kind of way. That's all information based, all science and meteorology based. If you're interested in staying up on the tropics in that way, in your inbox every Monday, sign up, clickorlando.com/newsletters, or if you're watching this on a big screen, you can scan that QR code and sign up that way as well. Just put your email in. It is free to sign up. We have a lot of newsletters. When you go to clickorlando.com/newsletters, just scroll down to where it says Tropics Watch, put your email in there, and then you are good to go. So just wanted to bring that to your attention in case you wanted more meteorology, more weather content to kind of digest. Here we go. On the Atlantic side, there's absolutely nothing still. And we love that. This is through June 9th, of course, of this recording. No new development expected over the next 7 days. Look at this. Again, there's the pop in Eastern Pacific. There's Barbara, there's Cosme, there's the other disturbance that could form over the next couple of days. There's hardly a cloud in the sky through the Gulf, through the Western Caribbean. There are a few stray clouds, not convective in nature by any means, through parts of the Caribbean. There's more stuff rolling on in parts of Central America, South America as well. So these storms are going to have to be watched again for the Eastern Pacific. So due in time, there might be a fifth storm out there. Again, that is the gift that keeps on giving to the Eastern Pacific right now. Another rule of thumb, side note, that when the Eastern Pacific is on fire like that, it's typically quiet in the Atlantic and vice versa. So that's something also to be on guard when you see some posts like that, that there's absolutely nothing firing in the short term in the Atlantic basin. And that is due in part to all of the convection, all of the thunderstorm activity hanging out in the Eastern Pacific. Main development region, we do have a couple of tropical waves out there, some thunderstorm activity low riding off of Africa as well. Otherwise, we are nice and quiet. There's still a little bit of dust out there as well for any of those tropical waves to contend with. So, what does the future hold? I showed you the MJO. I showed you that pulse of convective activity that could try to bleed into the Atlantic side over the next couple of weeks. And if it does so, we're going to have to watch the Western Caribbean and extreme Southwest Gulf Bay of Campeche area. Climatologically, that's where we are looking at this time of the year anyway. So I have the ensemble here. This is the European ensemble. I don't want this to get too wordy, but if you're just finding our channel for the first time, we always talk about ensembles being the key to look at this time of the year, not those crazy model runs that get plastered over social media. Ensembles are the thing to look at when we just don't have a ton of information. Different initial conditions are posted into the model, into the ensemble member, and when you get kind of a convergence or a similar story being told by multiple ensembles of that ensemble run, by multiple members of that ensemble run, you get more confidence into that solution coming into fruition. So this is on June 13th, and I picked June 13th because this was the second date that was said that a major hurricane strike was coming to the Gulf Coast. We've now passed June 4th and June 13th. No hurricane strike. This is like, if anybody's seen Parks and Recreation, great show, when the Zorp people were out there and they're like, oh, wait, I got the dates wrong. This is what this is becoming. And that's why I needed to continue to book the park for the end of the world kind of thing. This is the nauseating stuff that continues to happen. So I'm anxious to see what date now that is going to be fixed for that major hurricane to strike land, because it's not out there. All of these numbers, by the way, and I think you might be able to clearly tell what's going on. Because all of those numbers represent a pressure in the model. The darker yellows and oranges represent the consensus that there's going to be a storm out there. The blue represents the higher pressure. Okay, so when there's blue, there's higher pressure. When there's yellow or orange, there's lower pressure. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So that's the storm out in the Eastern Pacific. There comes the next one emerging in that direction through June 13th. That's going to be the D storm, by the way, because we're way out into the future. But then watch what happens. We're going to look through the Euro ensemble first, and then we'll go into the GFS. There is a very teeny tiny symbol for a couple of guys in the Western Gulf, okay? And again, with that MJO pulse starting to bleed over, you would expect as we get towards 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th for maybe there to be an increased probability anyway down in this side of the basin. That was a terrible, terrible box I was trying to draw. We'll go out into the future a little bit more. Still relatively quiet, and that is through June 24th. Okay, that was the Euro ensemble. Very limited activity on the Atlantic side at best. At best. GFS is still going a little nuts, but there's the 13th. I wanted to start on the 13th. No major hurricane on the Gulf Coast. So again, we've now gone past June 4th and June 13th with no major hurricane. That wasn't a busted forecast, by the way. I want to be clear about that. That it was not a busted forecast, what you saw across social media. It was either negligence for those that were sharing those models that didn't understand what was happening, or it was they knew what was happening and they went with the scary GFS solution anyway. I'm 100% certain that both of those were in play because I know all that posted. Um, so there was negligence and there were scare tactics for views and clicks. You're not going to find that here. Even when there's nothing going on, I always say this. You're going to read this in the newsletter tonight. Even when there's nothing going on, there's always something to break down in the world of weather, whether it's interesting to everybody. It doesn't matter to me. I like talking about it. I hope you guys like listening to it. And that's why we're such a cool and great and unique weather community on this platform because we talk about each other's weather reports. We're very active in the comments and we shoot ideas off of each other and stuff to learn and to spread the word of garbage and hype is not cool, not a good thing out there. So this is the GFS run again as I go on my many tangents. But I thought it was important to show that we've now gone through two different dates where if you're watching other channels on YouTube, I should start naming them by name. But I I always say I don't want to harp on that. I just feel like it's important to recognize that now there were two major hurricane strikes supposed to happen by June 13th. This recording's on June 9th, but there's nothing the models that aren't forecasting that anymore. As we told you at the end of May, that was not going to happen. So here we go. This is the GFS ensembles. It is certainly a little more aggressive, as you might imagine. Deep oranges down here, a couple of different low pressure centers. All of these are relatively weak storms. 994, 1000, 995. Those are the millibars. The lower the millibars, the lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. So when you have something in the high 900s, certainly low 1000s, that is a fairly weak storm. The bigger storms are sub 990, sub 980, and then your major hurricanes are getting way down into the mid 900s and then low 900s. Milton was extreme, and that was upper 800s. That's when you get the crazy stuff. So, still, the GFS does have something right in that if something is going to try to develop, it's likely going to be in this square. And the main reason for that is we have thunderstorm activity rolling down here, might get caught up and brought up in this way. We have the Central American gyre. Central American gyre right here. If it spits out a storm, it's going to go like that because we also have this giant chunk of high pressure out here, the Bermuda High, to kind of force everything like that. So that's going to want to keep it to the Western Gulf. That is if something was to get going. And that is still a big if. Again, the Euro ensembles hardly paints any kind of picture. The GFS is a little more bullish. But again, one of the things that I want to continue to talk about this time of the year, especially, and there's another little signal, one bigger signal from the GFS, that's going to be towards June 25th. Western Gulf. Again, wouldn't put any stock into that at this point because that's the only runs or only model ensemble group that is showing anything. But I just want to caution until I see other ensembles or models start to come on board, no stock should be put into the GFS. Its main bias is to develop these storms too quickly in the Western Caribbean and Southern Gulf and too aggressively in the Southern Gulf. Sometimes, and one of its biases again is to do that, but it's to really not sample that ridge of high pressure to its north a little bit, and that allows for things to blossom down here and then eventually lift up. So there are a number of things at play. And again, we told you that at the end of May, when all of these doom and gloom scenarios were going from Florida to New Orleans to Texas to Houston and then back to Florida from the 4th through the 13th. And we said it wasn't going to happen. Again, it is important to trust your source, and hopefully I can stop beating this drum soon. But until I see that stop, I just want to continue to show you in real time the modeling talk about the science and meteorology why that's not going to happen, and then just really break down it and just give you guys something to look at for yourself, so that you can go on those channels and you can say, okay, that is trash. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And right now, the Atlantic, crickets, and I love it. And none of those storms in the Eastern Pacific, not going to hurt a dang thing. And I love it. So far, so good. By the way, and in the tropical segments of this video, I just want to show something else that I love. Let me go back to I am on that other weather computer. If we're going super long range, so that's going to be through the last day or two of June. This is the first week of July. Look at this. Bust out the telestrator. All this brown. Most of the Atlantic is going to be in a super unfavorable environment once we roll into July. If we do have something develop during the last week of June, there may be something out there still. And again, that is a big if. But if the Atlantic dodges that low to medium chance of something popping on the western half of the Caribbean / Gulf, there's going to be, I think, an extended quiet period, because there we go through July 14th. There we go through July 21st. And that's as far as it goes out. But we are still brown here, so there should be those tropical waves lacking. This is Africa, by the way, over here. Here's the United States and Atlantic Basin, main development region. And there's kind of brown at home. And there's a lot of brown where we would develop those thunderstorm complexes over Africa to thrive and then roll out over the Atlantic. That direction, it's just not favorable. So if we get out of a teeny tiny shot for development, third-ish week of June, give or take, we might be going to the mid to late July with very little to nothing. And that's great. And I wonder what new hype would happen there if that would happen. I guess that's a story for another time. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you had a great weekend. Post in the comments where you're tuning in from if you're still listening to me rambling on about nonsense. Great to see you guys. Great to have you here. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. But wait, there's more. There's an encore performance. I almost forgot to talk about the interesting thing going on when it comes to the sea surface temperature anomaly. So Saharan dust stole the story last week as kind of rolling through the Western Caribbean and then pinwheeling up into Florida. Look at the change here in the temp. Now, this is the change in surface temperature over the last 7 days. Look at all the blue. There were storms around to kind of churn up some of that cooler water. One of the byproducts that the Saharan dust has also, we talk about it a lot for being a stable layer of very hot air. But the other component of this is the dust particles suspended at about 10 to 20,000 feet in the atmosphere. They also help to deflect solar radiation. So where we have these really thick dust clouds in that level of the atmosphere, the particles in there really help to deflect some solar heating. And as a result of that, we don't get as much solar radiation to the surface and therefore not as much heating. So one of the other byproducts of Saharan dust that we like is that it does limit the surface heating of the surface temperatures of the water. And you see the change there. Now, not to get too excited, we do still have anomalies that are above normal for this time of the year with respect to average. But nonetheless, over the last 7 days, we have done a lot of cooling where the dust has really been hanging out. It was thick at times in Florida. We had some dirty rain in Florida. There was dirt on people's cars and all that stuff, just like we thought as it came through. And we also developed our daily thunderstorms. Sorry, I almost forgot about that, guys. That was one of the cooler things I wanted to show you relative to, okay, we forecast that dust coming through. We talk about the byproducts of that dust. And then there is the ramifications, not only the dirty rain across parts of the southeast corner of the U.S., including Florida, but then also the lack of solar radiation, or at least not as much, and the cooling of the Gulf Caribbean, parts of the Western Atlantic because of those dust particles. Okay, I think it's for real this time. We'll catch you guys next time.